Welcome, folks, to our first intergenerational community of practice session for the new year. So it's good to see you all. I'm Stephanie, and I'm representing Healthy Aging Alberta. I'm the Engagement and Communication Specialist here. And today our theme is around emergency preparedness. And it's hosted by the Core Alberta and the Core National Intergenerational Community of Practice groups. We are one group across two platforms. So welcome. We are going to record this session so that we'll send you a copy afterwards. And if there's anything that you wanted to rewatch or you want to share it with a colleague, you'll have access to that. And before we get going, I'd just like to do a land acknowledgement here. So in the spirit of our journey to promote reconciliation, we'd like to honor the truth of the shared history and acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We're grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. And I'm tuning in from Mohkinstsis, which is the meeting of the waters, and it's also known as Calgary. And Calgary is on the traditional, on Treaty 7 territories and the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika nations. The Yahe Nakota, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney nations, and the Tsuut'ina. And I also want to recognize the Métis regions 5 and 6. And my privilege of living and working on these lands, and being able to virtually host groups like this with you fine folks. And I'd also like to acknowledge that because we are a national community of practice, that we do have folks tuning in from all across Turtle Island and acknowledging all the traditional lands and territories that we are tuning in from for this session. Okay, just some housekeeping. Of course, you're familiar with your mute and video icons. We will be recording it, so we recommend you have yourself muted while the presenters are going, and then we'll have some question and answer and some breakout times that you could unmute yourself and ask some questions, or we'll have some breakout conversations here in a bit. You can also use any of the reactions if you want to talk to us, and I will be running the recording up in a few days on our platform. So Betty will be sending out the post-recording link as well as any resources that we have for you. So you'll get that from us in a few days here. Okay. And just to let you know about CORE, if you're not familiar with the platforms, so we have 3 core platforms: Alberta, BC, and Canada, and this community of practice group is on Alberta and Canada groups. You could join us in that space. CORE stands for Collaborative Online Resources and Education, and it's a space to share your resources, view resources from other folks. It has a lot of really interesting research and reports and videos and toolkits, and it's a free platform to just support the community-based senior serving organizations and other folks working with older adults. It has events for capacity building such as this, and there's group spaces where you can collaborate with others on some topics. So intergenerational group is one of the ones, but we have some other different groups that you can also collaborate in. And I support the work of this group, and I am from Healthy Aging Alberta, and our backbone is United Way of Calgary and area. And I'll pass it to my colleague Jane, who's going to introduce us all.
Okay, thank you. Now you know Stephanie. She's a really busy girl. Betty Good, our fearless leader, who has good links into generational practice, isn't able to be with us today. But we do, and we have another new member, Tracy Swin, who isn't able to be with us, but she is the founder of Win Generational Network out of Montreal. So we have Rochelle Petit from Newark Innovation Center in Toronto, Deanne Druin from Gender Actions in Ottawa and Victoria, Carrie Albert, who has recently presented an iGen intergenerational classroom that she is in Saskatoon, and Lily Vigiano, our intergenerational initiatives manager from Volunteer Canada. So we all work together to try and bring you very informative things, and I'll turn it over to Rochelle.
Thank you, Jane. And you can always reach out to us if you want to join our little leadership group here to help plan this content. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're really, really excited today to talk about this really important topic. I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction so people can get a bit more information and know our presenters and team. So we have Stacey Barter, Michelle Calusi, and Rob Wypon from Building Resilient Neighborhoods, also known as BRN and Hey Neighbor Collective. And they're going to discuss some intergenerational examples of how building connections in the community can be ignited by emergency preparedness. Since 2012, BRN has been developing and implementing different on-the-ground programs to empower and activate neighborhoods to build stronger social networks as a foundation of community resilience. BRN's flagship neighbor-to-neighbor programs, Connect and Prepare, helping neighbors, and Resilient Streets bring neighborhoods together to strengthen social connections, foster mutual support, and become better prepared for and resilient to different kinds of emergencies and chronic stresses. So they're going to be starting their presentation today. So they'll be sharing their screen, and we'll be having a bit of a different platform. If you've been here before, we'll have some breakout rooms as well. So hopefully you're all excited to learn more about this and how it connects to intergenerational programming.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm just going to stop my screen and pass it over to those fine folks, and they're going to start their presentation.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Rochelle, Stephanie, Jane, for the introductions. So I'm Stacey Barter. I'm the Executive Director of Building Resilient Neighborhoods. I'm joining today from my home on the traditional unceded territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Kapsapsum and Songhees nations. And we're really excited to be here, really excited to share and also learn with you. We'll share a bit about our work, but we're also hoping to have a fairly interactive discussion and to learn from all of you as well. And before we get started with our presentation, I'll just pass the floor to Michelle and Rob to introduce themselves. So Michelle, if you want to say hello.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm one of the co-founders of Building Resilient Neighborhoods, along with Stacey and Rob.
Hey, everybody. Rob Wypon, yeah, and I'm a co-founder of BRN as well, and do a lot of the story capturing, so I'll add a little bit to that today.
Wonderful. And I saw on the list that our new colleague Jason is also here and listening in. It's day 2 for Jason, so thanks for being here with us, Jason. We're excited to have you as well. So I'll just share a few slides just to kind of get us started. And then we want actually right away to get a chance for you to say hello and introduce yourselves as well. So I'll just share a little bit. Rochelle already spoke a bit about who we are and what we do, but we'll share a little bit more. Essentially, what we want to share today is a bit about our work, why we focus on intergenerational neighborly connections with this focus on preparedness and resilience, and our particular program, which we call Connect and Prepare, will share a bit about that and how we're seeing really strong impacts around community building through this approach. Some of our learnings that we're finding as we go around doing this work on emergency preparedness and resilience as a way to build intergenerational connections, and hopefully lots of time for discussion. So this is, we asked if we could kind of mix it up in terms of the format. I'm not sure what your usual format is, but we're thinking we'll start with some small group introductions. We like to get everybody's voice in the room before you start hearing from us talking at you. We'll do our presentation, and then after the presentation, we'll do some Q&A, but then we'd like to move into some small group discussions so that everybody has a chance to share thoughts and ideas, and then we'll come back as a larger group to see what emerged from those small group discussions. So a bit about us. Rochelle, I think, gave a great intro. We've been working, we started in Victoria in 2012 with this focus on community resilience. And, the three of us came together initially because I think we were all really interested in, in our various ways. We've been working in community or engaging in community for many, many years and curious about why it is that certain communities, when times get tough, are more resilient than others. Some are able to respond to challenges more effectively. And is there a way to intentionally, actually, proactively build resilience ahead of time, ahead of crises? So that's kind of been the core of our work. And where we've landed over, now more than a decade of doing this work, where we really have chosen to focus is on neighbor to neighbor connections. So this idea that resilient communities really start with connected, prepared, and caring neighbors. And it's the people right next door, those strong connections with folks who live right around us that really make a difference when we have different kinds of challenges. The other thing I'll say right off the bat, we don't lead with the intergenerational lens in our programming, but the neighbor to neighbor focus is usually inherently intergenerational. When some of us live in communities where maybe there's only certain demographics, but most of us are in mixed generation blocks or buildings. And so inherently this work is intergenerational. I'll just say, as part of our introduction, we also have been doing this work now since 2019 in collaboration with a larger collective impact initiative here in BC called the Hey Neighbor Collective. This started within the city of Vancouver, and it's kind of spread from there. And it's a whole bunch of partners who are focused on how do we do this work? How do we build stronger social connections and resilience, particularly in multi-unit housing? Because we've seen that in these more dense building environments, there's unique challenges around being connected with our neighbors. You might think being closer together we'd be more connected, but in fact, we find some of the research shows the opposite. And so we've all been working together to test different ways of trying to have stronger communities as particularly in urban environments. We're living in more dense kind of building environments. This has animation. I didn't know. A quick, just letting you know, within Hey Neighbor Collective, it's this very large collective of housing operators, NGOs, policymakers, researchers, health authorities. So there's a number of us who are working together to try and learn and really move the needle on some of these issues. And then at Building Resilient Neighborhoods, with our collaboration with the larger collective, we've been testing and scaling this work, particularly on neighbor to neighbor connections with these three pillars of connect, prepare, and care. So how do we get more connected? How do we get more prepared as neighbors? And how do we build communities that inherently, naturally support each other and look out for each other? And so that's what we'll be sharing more about today, particularly in the zone of number 2 and number 3 there, the prepare and the care, what some of the work is that we've been doing. And before we turn it over to do some intros with you, I'll just share, we're going to be sharing about our own experience delivering these programs. But in the last maybe 4, 5, 6 years, we have moved from delivering these programs ourselves, which we incubated and started in Victoria, to more of a train the trainer model. So we now have partners, place-based organizations, local governments, health authorities, and then housing operators that we're training to deliver this. So we're really excited that we're now seeing this work happening through other folks in lots of different communities. So some of the stories we're sharing are ones that are ours to share, and others we're passing on from some of our delivery partners. So we thought we'd start just to be interactive with a little Menti poll, and Michelle is going to put the link in the chat. You can also, if you want, you can grab this QR code if that is the technology that works for you. If not, there's just a link that's going to get put in the chat. We have a little poll that asks some questions about your own experience with being connected and prepared with your neighbors. So if you click on that link, it asks you to rate your level of agreement with some statements. So the statements are, I know most of the neighbors where I live. It asks you some questions about how connected and prepared you feel with your neighbors. So go ahead and grab that, and then I will share just to get a sense of how connected and prepared we feel collectively with our neighbors in this group here. Okay, so, oh, did it work? Let's see. Technology. Love it when it works. And then sometimes it doesn't work. All right, here we go. I'm gonna try again. So I'm not going to put it on full screen because for some reason it popped me out of this when I tried to do that. If you come back to the main Zoom screen now, you can see the results from folks here. So the first statement, I know most of my neighbors where I live. The majority, it looks like pretty strong, 3.5. I don't know if that's out of 5. It looks like most people, the majority of you do know most of your neighbors. And then there's quite a few of you who don't. And I imagine those who don't probably know some, but not all. The second statement was, I feel comfortable to ask my neighbors for help or small favors. That's actually quite strong in this group, which is really interesting because many of the groups we work with or we talk to, we find people are pretty comfortable offering help, but less comfortable asking for help. And so that's interesting to see that that's fairly strong in this group. In the event of an emergency, like an extreme weather event, I know who might need help where I live. Again, it looks fairly strong, but there's a lot of you who aren't so sure. And then when we get to the last one, neighbors where I live have a plan of where to go, what we might need, and how to help each other in the event of an emergency. That looks much lower. So it sounds like, some of those core foundations are in place with your neighbors around knowing each other, which we know makes a difference in emergencies, but that kind of more formal planning is an area that is maybe not as strong. So that's interesting, and we can talk more about what we see as some of the opportunities around that. We wanted to start again before we start diving into our presentation to give you a chance to kind of land together. I don't know, I think everyone knows each other, so we thought we'd do some introductions. And Michelle, if you want to kind of set us up for this, that would be great. And so we're going to go into small groups and just do some roundtable introductions if you want to share your name, where you are, what your organization or role is. And this just an invitation for a little warm-up question about how connected and collectively prepared for emergencies are you and your neighbors. So we're thinking we'll take about 7 minutes. So, time to just go around and hear from each person, and then we'll pop back.
Are we ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay.
Welcome back. I was just saying, I hope that gave you a chance to say hello, maybe meet some new folks. I know there's lots of you who've been in this community practice for a long time, but some folks who might be newer. So hope you got a chance to connect and also just start thinking about this in terms of our own lives. I often say we do all this work, but then when I start thinking about my own reality where I live, it's like, oh yeah, okay, there's opportunity here for increasing connection and actually walking the talk. So I always like thinking about, what is our own experiences here. So we're happy now to share a little bit more about our experience around this theme, and then we'll have a chance to chat more with you. So we wanted to start with, just talking a bit more about why have we chosen to focus in on neighborly connections as really what we see as sort of the core foundation of building up social infrastructure and resilience in communities. And I always start with, I always feel like, oh, I'm dating myself with this picture. This is a picture of me when I think I was 4 with my buddy. My own story of like what motivates me around neighborly connections. I grew up in a very small community in BC, a town of about 500. And this was one day we went out, we were collecting buttercups to bring, and we brought them to our neighbor who lived next door. And what I like remember and think of fondly in terms of where I grew up was this sense that it really was a village. We all looked out for each other. And there was kind of this open door policy that I could go over to my neighbor and bring my silly buttercup flowers. And when times were hard, we helped each other out. So I remember when I was in elementary school, one of my friends' house burned down. They had a house fire, and the whole community rallied together to, house that family, clothe that family, fundraise to rebuild their home. And so there was this sense of commitment and taking care of each other. And I often hear stories about this in rural communities, that's sort of the ethos or the essence of the rural community. And when we are out in community in urban contexts, we often hear people longing for that kind of community and feeling some sadness that there is this often a disconnect in terms of how connected we are with our neighbors. And so lots of us want this type of connection, and we know it can make such a difference. So, we hear stories about where there are neighborly connections where it makes such a difference in terms of different kinds of emergencies. So not just those big ones like the fire, but this was a story shared with us by Anne, who I believe at the time she shared the story, I think was in her 90s. And she shared that her neighbor brings newspapers to everyone on their floor each morning. And because she had a relationship with her neighbor noticed she hadn't taken in her newspaper, and Anne had had a fall. And so her neighbor knew that she needed assistance. So this kind of, having the neighborly connections enables us to, know when people might need support. Another story that was shared with us by Tegan, who's has a young family, her son Bodie, that, I think many of us have lived through this. Daycare called and said, guess what? Daycare staff are sick. Daycare is closed today. Tegan had to get to work. And luckily, Nicola, who is on the left in this photo, was able to step in because they had a relationship, and she was able to watch Bodie for the day. So there's these kind of small everyday emergencies that neighbor to neighbor connections can help with. And then I think that's at the kind of everyday level. Unfortunately, what we're starting to see now, and many of us know this, is that we're having more and more bigger emergencies as well. And these are some clips from headlines in BC when in 2021 we had the heat dome and the tragedy of 619 people dying in the heat dome in BC. Most of those people were people who lived alone. Many of them were older, and most of them were preventable deaths. And so we think a lot about how, were we more connected? Were we in touch with each other as neighbors? Might some of those have been preventable? So, we know this kind of social connection, we're safer, we're happier, we're more prepared, and we're healthier when we're more socially connected. I think many of us know this. We're probably preaching to the choir here in terms of the folks who are around this virtual table. But it is a bit of a pinch point that I think we know that this is so important. Increasingly, we know how important that is. And yet we also know that we're at a time where people are experiencing isolation and loneliness like we've never maybe experienced before. We know it has profound health implications. Many of you have probably heard of these studies about, levels of chronic loneliness and social isolation being associated with risks of premature death, so serious impacts on our health. And when we were reflecting recently within Hey Neighbor Collective of the last 5 years of our journey together, we were recognizing that, when we started 5 years ago, there was this recognition of the importance of social connectedness to combat this loneliness epidemic. But now we're in a moment where actually we're realizing it's not just health and well-being. It's not just about loneliness. It's actually life-saving, and it actually is what makes the difference for us to be resilient to all kinds of challenges, including some of these climate challenges that are coming our way. So the idea that we work from is that this social infrastructure, this invisible glue in our communities, is really, those are the muscles we need to build up so that we have them when we need them. So these kind of resilience muscles we can draw on. So this is why we created Connect and Prepare. The focus of Connect and Prepare, this program which brings groups of neighbors together right where they live to get more prepared and connected together, is really focused on bridging these three elements. So getting more connected, building a culture of helping each other and looking out for each other, and getting more prepared for emergencies. So the philosophy and is really backed up by research. This is an article that was done by an academic in the States who looked at the tsunami and earthquake in Japan and what made a difference in disaster recovery. And what they found was it actually wasn't the communities who had all the emergency supplies that fared better, it was the ones who had the stronger social ties. And I just like even now when I see this image of the woman carrying the elder on her back, I'm really moved by that, right? They knew who needed help. They were there to help each other and connecting and supporting each other across generations. So the title of this article was it was a blog article, Social Ties, Not Just Sandbags. It's really the social ties that make the difference. Also, backed up by the evidence in the Chicago heat wave of 1995, where there was research done in between two neighborhoods during the heat wave, and the number of deaths in each neighborhood, and it showed that basically the neighborhood that had stronger social networks, Auburn Gresham, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, they had far fewer deaths than the one that had fewer social connections. So the whole premise is this idea that it's who's in your kit, not just what's in your kit, that really matters. And a lot of traditional emergency preparedness tends to focus on these big events. It tends to focus on what can we do as individuals. That's very important, but we believe it's not enough. And really what matters is this collective preparedness, this collective coming together as neighbors. And also, not just thinking about those big events, those shocks, but as when Rochelle was kind of reading our intro, also the chronic stresses, the climate change stuff, the issues around food security, the everyday emergencies. So moving from traditional preparedness, which tends to focus on having a plan as an individual in your own home, to how can we come together as neighbors to get prepared together? How can we have shared preparedness? That it's not just about plans, it's about relationships. It's not just about being prepared for the big events, but the everyday events. And really, actually, how do we get out of the scary part of emergency preparedness into celebrating our strengths, our assets, making it actually fun and even joyful? So that's sort of the focus and philosophy behind Connect and Prepare. So what this looks like in practice in terms of how we roll out the program, as I said, we bring groups of neighbors together, and it's very much focused on building capacity to take action together. And so often these are intergenerational groups of neighbors. They come together, they kind of move through this cycle of learning about neighbor connections and preparedness, looking at how connected or prepared are we as a group of neighbors? What are our strengths that we can really draw on? Oh, wow, we've got nurses on our street. Amazing. We've got young people who have got incredible skills. Who can we rely on? What strengths do we have? Getting inspired around ideas for action and then actually designing projects or initiatives together. And so that act of doing things together really strengthens the relationship. One of the things that I think we feel very strongly about with Connect and Prepare is using a community development approach that is focused on activating the strengths within communities. So instead of, a lot of traditional emergency preparedness is just delivering information to people, which is, can be helpful, but it is limited in terms of its impact. So by actually having residents themselves really lead and take action together, we feel like that makes a huge difference. So the groups of neighbors that go through Connect and Prepare identify how do we want to become more connected? How do we want to become more prepared? And these are some examples of the types of projects that we've seen neighbors come together, often across generations, to do. And we thought we'd just share a few of these, ranging from skill sharing to buddy systems to fun parties. So we'll tag team a little bit here. Michelle, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, we're huge fans of the Party with a Purpose. So, in particular with sort of typically serious and heavy subjects like emergency preparedness, how can we gamify it? How can we bring some fun and joy to this so it's less scary and actually motivating folks to come together and give some energy to it? So framing parties around come and meet your fire department and see a demonstration, or come and learn about, or let's talk about as neighbors how, what we might do together on our block. And there are lots of ways that people have built social events and parties around the theme of emergency preparedness.
This is a story from one of the first buildings we worked with, and it was a seniors building, so I was hesitant to put it in this presentation because I know we're focused on intergenerational. But when I was reflecting on it, I was remembering that there, even within this seniors building, there were, of course, folks who were quite elderly and frail, and those who were younger, older adults, if you will. So I think that is an important kind of context. But this was a group, it's a low-rise building in Victoria, particularly seniors with disabilities. And they started working with us through our Resilient Streets program, where they got inspired to set up lobby intercepts and coffee cafes in their lobby. So they started meeting each other as neighbors there. Through that, they realized there were a lot of challenges around food security in the building. So they got inspired to connect with a local food bank and set up a system of bringing healthy food distribution into the building, so people didn't have to leave, because a lot of people had mobility challenges and couldn't get out of the building. And through that, they were like, oh, we're starting, okay, now we feel like we're ready to take on emergency preparedness. So they did connect and prepare with us. And through that, ended up setting up a buddy system, developing shared emergency supplies. But ultimately, because they realized a lot of people had low income in this building and couldn't afford their own emergency supplies, they did a party with a purpose where they got a small grant to develop grab and go kits for everyone in the building, but they did it as a party, so everyone assembled it together. And what we heard through that, awesome, they got these kits. We love that. They've got shared supplies. We love that. But really, what made a difference was that through the process of working together, it actually changed the way they thought, which was, I think, captured in this quote, that we focused on our abilities rather than our disabilities and realized, yeah, we're stronger together. We actually can take care of each other. We're just sharing a smattering of ideas just to, we won't go into depth in any of them. This was a building that we worked at, townhouses of families, and they had no common space. And they realized they really didn't know each other well as neighbors. And so the foundation of being prepared together was actually getting to know each other. So they ended up doing these intercepts where they got permission to take over their parking lot and do parties in the parking lot, where they set up, playground equipment. They had a small kind of garden area as well. So they started doing regular potlucks as neighbors. That this was the first step in getting prepared. And then they carried on from there with various emergency planning efforts. Similarly, another building where they had this common room, but literally when we walked in, there was dust on the table. It was not used. There were, I think there was challenges around getting access to the common room. So their intervention was, we're reclaiming the common room. We're going for monthly potlucks. They had this incredible intercultural, multicultural community. So they started doing multicultural potlucks there. Michelle,
Well,
to you.
yeah, one of our housing partners, BC Housing, a group in one building wanted to create floor connectors because it was a big high rise. So identifying tenants on each floor who would have a role to actually intentionally reach out to others on the floor, share information about emergency preparedness. So we worked with this group of floor connectors over 6 to 8 sessions. And together, they identified some of the gaps that they were experiencing in their building around preparedness. And they actually designed and initiated a number of tools. The one in the center, Hi Neighbor, is actually a door hanger that residents can use and tick off if they have pets, or let people know what their situation is so that when there's an emergency, folks know they might need help. And emergency preparedness information, they didn't know anything about it, where to go or what to do. So together again, creating and then distributing and sharing with their neighbors that information. And this group, again, the party with the purpose, they got a grant, applied for a grant, and created these grab and go bags. And then the distribution became a bit of a party in the lobby. And I think, Rob, you actually interviewed some of these folks. Is there anything you want to add about their experience?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of learnings from that, starting with, of course, people with facing multiple disabilities of different kinds in this situation, creating heightened levels of fear and sometimes even a fear about socializing together. And by overcoming that, then the payoffs were just so much bigger for them. And so we noticed that, in this grab and go kit was one of their main projects to get some grants and distribute these to other residents in the building. And by going through that process together and planning and doing so much of it on their own, when I talked with them, I was just struck by the depth of emotion that they had for having gone through this together and empowering themselves. And I think that we all started to understand even more so how important it is that it's hard to kind of objectively measure impact. And when you get in there, you find that something that on the surface might look to someone as a relatively small impact, just distributing some grab and go kits, was profoundly influential for these people in their relationships with each other and then ultimately with their broader community because everyone in the building came out and was so happy to get these free kits and were chatting and talking and connecting for the first time. And the leaders, the 5 or 6 people leading it, were just so proud of what they'd achieved together. And so these relatively smaller gains in that context were actually huge gains. And so it really made us think a lot about always emphasizing that in this kind of work that you could only know from the inside, sort of a really understanding a particular neighbor group. What's success going to be for them? What's that going to look like? And then you measure it from inside in that particular way.
Yeah, thanks.
This is a great example from another BC housing building, actually, where they had a lot of families in the building with youth, and they had thought they wanted to kind of animate and support some kind of youth group or activity in the building, and they used emergency preparedness, which, on the surface seems kind of strange to link with young people, but they really wanted to support young people as ambassadors and folks who could then actually orient and train their parents and provide information to their parents about this. And so they brought youth together and spent a day together and really highlighted the fact that, even though you're young people, you do have a lot of skills and assets, and really reinforced that and helped them identify and think about what could they do. And even the assessment, the mapping your resilience activity that we normally do, we gamified it and it became a scavenger hunt for them. And then during a barbecue later in the summer, these young people actually hosted the emergency preparedness table and again used games to engage other young people in that event.
And not just young people, actually all like the full
All
community.
generations.
Yeah, all generations.
In general, I'll just say that the experience we've had is that the act of neighboring is in itself inherently intergenerational.
Just a couple more examples. It was hard to, we were like, which ones can we cut out? We love all these stories. This is a really cool project in Victoria where the neighbors got a grant, partnered with, some partners of ours at a really great organization called Neighbor Lab. And this was a single family street. They co-designed and developed an emergency supply bench, so sort of a placemaking intervention, so a little neighbor hub where they designed and built this bench that also houses shared emergency supplies for folks on the block, but it also has a bulletin board for neighbors to communicate with each other, solar panel where you can charge your phone all the time or in the event of an emergency. But like all of the things, it's really, they got a cool bench out of it. It's an area where neighbors can come and talk to each other. But the act of working on this project together just deepened those connections. And I ran into these folks. This was years ago that we did this project. I ran into these folks just a couple months ago, and they said, we're still going. It's the lovely ladies of Leonard. It's the women on the street who every month are doing activities. So that kind of kickstarted a whole kind of culture change on that street. And this is the last sort of example slide before we switch to some of our learnings. The other thing we've seen as an amazing outcome is this idea of neighbor skill sharing. And Michelle already highlighted the example of the youth who then were able to share their skills around emergency preparedness. But we often see groups just coming to recognize, oh, our neighbors, we have all different kinds of skills. So we've seen groups go on to do, fire extinguisher training. Someone on the block was a retired fire chief. Let's do that together. Or cooking skills, or you name it. This was just a fun one where someone said, you know what, I've got floral arranging skills. And they hosted floral arranging workshops, which again on the surface seems like, what's that got to do with emergency preparedness? But it's about just recognizing we all have different skills. They created these lovely little lonely bouquets and then left them around their neighborhood, which these little notes, I'm a lonely bouquet, please take me home. So it also brought some joy to people's day as well. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I think Rob was already saying, it's difficult to measure the impact, and we are also measuring the impact beyond just some of this qualitative stuff. And they're significant. So these are some of the results from our scaling pilot when we first started training other people in other communities. And just we're seeing big impacts in terms of people feeling more confident, actually feeling more prepared for emergencies, the number of neighbors who are feeling like it's strengthening their relationships and understanding what some of their strengths and vulnerabilities are. So we just want to share a few more slides around some lessons that we're learning, particularly around why this neighbor to neighbor connection is so powerful in terms of intergenerational connections and why emergency preparedness. So Michelle, I'll turn it to you and you can tell me to advance the slides.
Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, the experiment with neighbor helping neighbor, as Stacy said, kind of grew out of this question around, how can we support aging in place and how can we create these cultures of mutual support and caring in our neighborhoods. And, this neighboring continuum is a good example of the process that we started to follow. So we understand that from our other work that, at the beginning, if neighbors can just say hi to each other, that's great. But really, you've got to have ways to animate additional bumping spots and ways to bring neighbors together so they have an opportunity for casual conversation. And then as they get to know each other, they move down the continuum and, they might I'm going to borrow my neighbor's ladder. And then maybe somebody organizes a potluck. And pretty soon there's the enough trust over time for folks to actually start to do things together. So our hypothesis was that if we bring folks together and strengthen connection and trust and provide systems and structures specifically around sharing and helping each other, then a culture of support will emerge that will be sustained in the building or on the street. And we worked with a number of partners in this project over a period of time, and the partners tried different approaches to this in their buildings, many of which had intergenerational aspects to them because, while the focus was on helping, the starting point for many of them, based on that continuum, was, oh, nobody knows each other in this building. We can't just leap to helping. We actually need to start with connection. So we learned that that's super important, that, the helping part can be a bit scary and overwhelming if folks don't have relationships and trust. So focus on connection first, break down some of those boundaries that people have, build some trust, and then culture change will emerge over time if you keep at it. And one of the other lessons was that emergency preparedness is this incredible cross-generational, consistent gateway that we saw almost in every building that we worked in, where It seems to be a common ground that everybody's concerned about these days. So part of it is a trend. It's in the air. People are kind of wondering about it, uncertain about it, and everybody can relate to it in some way. We've all heard the stories, and more people have experienced, as some of you said in the chat earlier. Yeah, we now have direct personal experience of this. So there's really high motivation as opposed to join a book club, which, might appeal to some people, but not others. Emergency preparedness is that common ground. So this idea of being top of mind, there's some urgency around it. It's prevalent and present in our day-to-day lives. We can all kind of relate to it, even if our relationship is, yeah, I don't really know very much about it. I need to know more. And, as we showed with some of our examples of Party with a Purpose and grab and go bags and, barbecues and scavenger hunts, it's so adaptable. There's so many ways you can come at emergency preparedness with folks, and really manageable. So there's some really clear process. So emergency preparedness is a gateway, and just to double click on this idea that the neighbor to neighbor level is sort of the other focus that we think is universal, where everybody has neighbors, everybody has assets and resources. In most cases, there's intergenerational features built in, and we're going to support people to live and age well in community.
Great. Yeah. We wanted to pause there and just have some time for Q&A before we go into some breakout groups to talk about some of the themes that we shared about. I'll just, before we do that, just say, Michelle led with, we've discovered that emergency preparedness is a gateway. And I'd actually emphasize that even more strongly, that when we did the Neighbors Helping Neighbors pilot, what we learned was most of where people landed with all those partners that were involved, emergency preparedness was the activity that they actually ended up doing and having the most impact with. They tried other forms of helping, but people were more resistant to that. But emergency preparedness was like an easy, yeah, we can all get behind this. And inevitably it leads to this conversation about mutual support, because it makes it's like the Trojan horse. It gets us in the doorway and lets us start talking about helping. So we'll pause and see if there's questions, comments. Rochelle, turn it to you if you want to help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was lovely. I'm just going to pop in the chat here and see there's a few people who have made some comments here. So one, Shayna was saying, LeBlanc Place is really inspiring example. Will you be sharing the process for bringing Connect and Prepare to similar housing complexes in other communities?
Yeah, sure. So, and Michelle, Rob, jump in. I'm not sure like specifically how to answer that question, other than to say, in terms of working with the process in other places, like our method is that we are training and working with different community partner organizations, and we're welcoming new folks to join our cohort anytime, all the time. And then our approach is that we have these community-based organizations who are bringing it to housing communities where they live. Do you want to add anything, Robert, Michelle, in terms of the process?
I just wanted to add too that we've seen positive impacts going in both directions, that community-based organizations have found that this has helped their own outreach to work on these kinds of projects with us in that way, and help residents connect up with community resources.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I would maybe add is that we're partnering more and more with housing operators as well. So that example of LeBlanc Place was actually a partnership with Capital Regional Housing. So they, oh, it sounds like we got some background noise. There we go. I don't know if you want to mute everyone and then we can unmute or something. Yeah, thanks. With LeBlanc Place, it was a partnership with Capital Regional Housing. So the housing operator themselves actually said, we want to bring this program into our buildings. And so they worked with us to help do outreach to find residents who are interested in co-hosting. So that there can be really great partnerships with, like Michelle was speaking also about our partnership with BC Housing as an example, but increasingly we're working with landlords and housing operators who see the benefit in this. They want their tenants and residents to be prepared and connected, and are starting to see benefits in that.
Sorry, can I just jump in to ask a follow-up? Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a great presentation. I work for the local health authority, so but like working with community partners, and there's a lot of interest, especially in the community where I'm at. There's a lot of housing complexes just for seniors. There's a lot of older adults living in this community. So I guess just if we're to reach out to you, then it would also be, it could be volunteers who live in these buildings that want to participate in the train the trainer, as well as maybe staff members from the local nonprofits, like something like that. They would potentially partner up, go to the train the training, and then kind of find a way to implement within like a building, for example.
Yeah, right now we specifically the approach that we're using for scaling, just to kind of have some rigor and fidelity to the model, is the train the trainer specifically for organizations, and then those organizations would work with the volunteers and the residents as champions to bring the program to their building. So the train the trainer would be with the organization, who then would do the outreach for those volunteers and work with them at that kind of next level. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
what health authority are you with, Shayna?
With Fraser Health.
Oh, we're working with Fraser, so we should follow up because we're doing a pilot in Hope.
Hope.
Okay, yeah, that's my colleague Tara.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely we'll be connected.
Yeah, I would love to follow up.
Okay. And I'm in White Rock, so different region, but lots of interest here as well.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Very cool. Awesome. Another comment here, Crystal. She's saying these are all amazing resources. She referred to the High Neighbor and the Resilient Skill Cards. How do people access these? Are these public? Are these like how can somebody get in touch with you to learn more about getting their hands on these types of resources?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us if there's specific ones that you're interested in, and we can chat about that. Right now, the resources are available to participants in the Connect and Prepare program, and we're in a process of also figuring out which ones we want to make available more generally as kind of DIY resources. So it actually might be great for us to hear which ones you're interested in, because that might give us some clues about which ones are important. We're always trying to discern which ones are more helpful to share when there's also facilitation support, and which ones are great for residents to just grab and run with themselves. So yeah.
Cool. So Crystal, reach out. Heather made a comment. She said, love this. We are working on aging in place and proactive planning in our region, and this is giving us great ideas. So that's awesome. And then Nancy asks, have you seen any ideas on how to get local emergency operations or community health involved? So any tips and tricks when getting local emergency operations or community health to be involved in this?
Either of you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, we've done pilots specifically with local government partners, with their emergency preparedness or emergency management departments. And in fact, the City of Victoria Emergency Management was a sort of co-creator of the original program. So we've kind of baked in a lot of their approaches and information. When we deliver the program here in Victoria, we still have emergency management staff show up to the sessions, and they share resources and talk. In another community, they had a whole session devoted in the Connect and Prepare training to let's meet our local government people and find out. So they brought them in as speakers. That's a very common approach where local governments, emergency management folks come and share, here's what we can offer and here's how we support communities so people understand that as a resource. So there's lots of ways to build that relationship.
In terms of health, these are new partnerships with us, and I think health authorities, for example, are increasingly understanding that there's a role for the health sector to be playing. Certainly, again, since the heat dome, there's been this kind of wake up to the particular role of health in this space. And I think this year we have some new partnerships with Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health, where we're actually experimenting with health authority staff being involved as facilitators or working in partnership with some of our other community partners for the delivery. So we're really excited about that because we actually think that, yeah, the health sector, I think, has an important role to play. So we'll see how that goes. We can share back.
And actually, in one of our communities this year, the health authority folks cultivated a partnership with the regional district. So they've got both folks leading the delivery.
In collaboration with community associations. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing a bit more about that. Let's see here. Heather has a follow-up. She said, what have been some of the best intentional activities to spark this kind of discussion, this collective support for aging in place when gathering groups together? So what are like the nuggets, or like we say, like the secret sauce when talking about this, if you have a few to share?
I mean, typically in the first Connect and Prepare workshop, we do a scenario exercise where they're given an emergency scenario. It's really possible and probable where they live. And then they work through kind of a mapping exercise to think through in this context, like this could really happen. What are the things we need to be thinking about in terms of who can offer help, who might need extra support, what do we have, what do we need? And it's really powerful because it really immerses you in thinking about reality. Who are we as a group of neighbors? And it's sort of a roundabout way at getting at some of those questions about how, we start thinking about, okay, what can I offer? What's the help I need? What's the help that other people need? And we're starting with talking about emergencies, but it inevitably starts us thinking about, oh, what are the other kinds of contexts that people might need help and support around aging? I've seen many, many cases where, this then catapults a relationship where there's different kinds of mutual support that end up happening that are supporting people to age longer in their community, right?
And you can see how it really is the Trojan horse, that bringing folks together and saying, okay, share about yourselves is very daunting and overwhelming for lots of people. But to say, oh, okay, in the context of emergency preparedness, like, yeah, what could I offer? So right away, it gives people that excuse, right, to start to share and get to know each other.
We love the whole group conversation, and we thought it'd be fun to go back into breakout groups and give you a chance to maybe have like just 10 minutes to chat as a group, what's top of mind, and then we'll come back as a large group again. But we had a couple questions that can be prompts, and you can take the conversation where you want in your groups. But we thought maybe as prompts you could think about these things. What do you think it is about emergencies and crises that tend to make it easier for people to connect and help each other? And, knowing that building trust is a critical factor towards actually getting to a place of mutual support and mutual assistance, what are some of the ways to accelerate trust building between neighbors, especially across generations?
And those questions are also in the chat for you.
Yeah, so let's have you got breakout set? Michelle set up breakout groups. We'll take about 10 minutes and you can have just a little buzz together in groups, and then we'll come back. Yeah, I think so. Okay. Hope you had a good chat. We were hoping to get to hear some of what you talked about, but I think in the interest of time, maybe we'll wrap up there. I hope you had a good conversation and it got those questions at least sparked some thinking and ideas. And we just wanted to thank you all again for hosting us. for listening with us, sharing some ideas. And please do feel free to follow up with us if we can support or if there's any ideas you'd like to explore together. And I will turn it over to, I think, is it going back to Betty or Rochelle or Jane or Stephanie? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it goes back to one of us. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful presentation. And I know in my breakout room, we had a really great conversation here about breaking down those points of connection and the vulnerability that people and the empathy people are able to share when there is emergency. And just the specificity of requests is enhanced too. It's easier to say, hey, I need a horse trailer to move these horses or something like that. So thank you so much. We had a really great conversation in my breakout, and I'm sure other folks also had great conversations in their breakout. We have a survey in the chat, and we're just going to spend a few moments to do that together before we wrap up the meeting. So please click on the link and give us your feedback. I shared it just there in the chat. We take this feedback at the end of each meeting, and it really helps us reflect on the session we just hosted and design our upcoming sessions. So please spend a few moments to do that. We'll just do that together, and then we'll do our wrap up. Okay, I am going to pull everybody back just so we have time for wrap up. But if you haven't finished that survey, please finish it right before you jump into your next things for the rest of the day. We really value your feedback. We look at every single one of your comments, and we use that for our work with this group. Okay, so I already talked about the recordings. We will send that out after. Betty, you'll see an email from Betty in a few days as soon as I get my act together and get this recording up online. Betty will send you some content. And then we, in the chat, we also put a link for on February 4th. Lily shared a link there for, there's an event for Global Intergenerational Week. So you can see that February 4th event link that Lily shared, and we'd like you to come join. We're also having our next community of practice called Engage at Every Age on February 24th. It's 10:30 to 12 Mountain Standard Time. So that's 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern. So please come join us for the Engage Every Age community practice. All of these events and links are in the core platform. You can just go to the event calendar anytime you want to see our upcoming content. So I did share our core national link in the page there, but you can also find them on the core Alberta and core BC platforms. For the provincial platforms, it switches to the local times. So it will show the Mountain or the Pacific time if you're looking at the event. It will show the local times. If you're really interested in this emergency preparation topic specifically, we do have an emergency prep group in CORE. It's hosted on the CORE Alberta platform. And I know Marilyn was here earlier in the meeting. I don't know if you're still kicking around, Marilyn. But Marilyn and I and Sam host that group, and we share different emergency prep type of resources. We have a community practice that's bringing folks together. So you're welcome to come join us. I think we have an event coming up soon. We haven't loaded it yet, but we will have something soon. So please join us, and you'll get that content in your notifications.
Stephanie,
And then,
can I interrupt?
Yes.
Before you finish up, Lily, I think, wants a couple of minutes
Yes.
just to talk about the launch.
Exactly. I was just going to pass it to Lily.
Oh, good.
So, Lily,
Good.
do you mind talking about the GIW launch, please?
Yeah, thank you. So GIW stands for Global Intergenerational Week, and it really kicks off a season of many different campaigns that celebrate volunteers, youth. We have a national intergenerational day in June. So it's a global movement, and we're trying to get a sense of what are people doing all around the world? So at the kickoff, I'll be joined by my friends in the United States as well as Mexico to talk about what this year's campaign looks like, how people can get involved, and why we do this in the first place. Really, what we're trying to showcase is that this is a growing movement, and that there are many unique ways to connect intergenerationally. And, the bigger that our movement becomes, it creates stronger cases for policy change, for funders to understand what we're doing and to resource us to do so, from the local level all the way up to the global movement. So if you have any questions about that, reach out. See you on February 4th. And I'm happy to share the recording of that event at our upcoming community of practice. Thanks for giving me the floor.
Okay, and before we go, Deanne, can you tell us what February 24th, what's Engage at Every Age?
Sure. We're going to be joined by Jose Fernandez, who is coordinating a program. It's actually a physical space, a daycare that is coupled with long-term care at the Curly in Ottawa. So Jose is part of Andrew Fleck's Children's Services, and they have 3 different locations in Ottawa where daycare is provided within the space of long-term care and joint programming with older adults. And so he's going to tell us more about their journey to establishing these great spaces and how other communities could also do something similar so that more intergenerational connections are made and community comes together between ages.
Thanks, Deanne. So thanks everyone for coming. Aren't you excited to be part of a global intergenerational movement? It's just so exciting. The meeting I was at for the first part of this was with a group in Scotland because they're planning a global intergenerational congress the end of September. So it's very exciting, and you guys are all part of this. So also Stacy mentioned that she's going to send me PDF slides of the presentation today. You'll be getting a follow-up email from me in the next few days. So that's going to be included, and I'll also include the registration link so you can register for February 24th. Okay, have a great afternoon, everybody, or day, wherever you are.